Okay, so we are finally ready to make the ball move. I've got the app all set up. We've got everything good to go. Let's talk about how we're going to do this. Um, the objectives, real quick, I want to remind you of the objectives because we are going to hit every one of this in the video. We're going to look at some new tools, so that's going to get hit. Um, as we make it move, it's going to require us to use this coordinate system. We're going to have to build an equation. It's going to almost feel like we're back in algebra class for just a second. Okay. We're going to use the sprite to simulate motion. That's really what we're shooting for. That's the big thing of this video. Remember, sprite, that word sprite just refers to the graphic that's going to move. So for us, our sprite is the ball. That's what we're going to move. And then we're going to use variables. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to record and use the data to make the sprite move. And we're going to use a little trick that's really, really common in programming, so you want to make sure that you're comfortable with that, because it's going to be an important concept. Okay, so let's get to this. First thing I want to do is a save as. Let's say this is version 3. And as that's updating, let's talk a little bit about just the way the ball is going to move. So I've got a tablet here. All right, so I've got my tablet. And I also happen to have a ball. All right, so imagine that this is my sprite. It's sitting on my screen. What we want is we want it to move in a very intuitive way. In other words, we want it to move the way a real ball would move. So if it's currently at this end of my screen and I tilt the tablet this way, gravity is going to make the ball move that way, right? And so that's exactly what we want our program to do. And then if I tilt it back, the ball comes back. Also, if I tilt it, this way or this way, I want it to move either way. So that's the basic idea, is I want the little sprite that's on my screen to move the same way that a real ball would move. Now think about this too. Okay, that's the basic idea. I'm talking too much. Let's get to the work. Let's get to work. So here is my screen. We've done our save as. Let's go into our blocks and start getting things set up so that they can move around. All right. So right now what we've got is we have the ability to update the labels. That's all fine and good. Labels are great, but we want to move, and we want the ball to move. So if we come over here to the drawer for the ball, in this drawer, we've got all of these different event handlers. We don't need a new event handler. The ball is going to move when it senses an acceleration. So this is the event handler we're using. We're going to continue to use that. We don't need any of these. We need a procedure. Procedures create different things. Here it creates, well, what do you do when you do this thing called bouncing? Or we're going to do moving. So we're going to do the procedure for moving. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about where are we going to move the ball to. And this requires us to go back to our coordinate system. All right, so here's our coordinate system. We talked about this in a previous video. Here's our ball right over here in the top corner. So right now our ball's position is at 0, 0. That's where our ball is right now. Okay, so it's at the top of the screen over to the side. Let's pretend for just a second that somebody comes along and they grab the tablet right here and they lift up on the top of the tablet. So what gravity would do is gravity would make the ball start to fall in this direction. Okay? And so when the person grabs this, the tablet senses an acceleration and it gives it some number, right? It gets a y acceleration, and it gives it a number. And we've played with those numbers in the label, so we know how that works. If you don't remember how that number works, you might want to go back and play with that a little bit more. Make sure you understand what happens. But basically, the more I pick up this side of the screen, the bigger this number gets. And then if I only pick it up just a little bit, this number is kind of little. And that's exactly the way the ball should move, right? If somebody tilts the screen just a little bit, that real physical ball that I had a second ago, it only moved just a little bit, moved kind of slowly. But if I tilt the ball or the screen a lot, the ball would move quick. And so that's exactly what we want. So here's what we're going to do. we're going to take the current position where the ball is. So right now, the current position is 0. Right now. Okay, so we're going to take the current position of where the ball is, and then we're going to add on to that the acceleration. Because remember, that it's going to give this a numerical value based on how much we've picked up the screen. So now all of a sudden, let's just say, for example, I pick it up enough that this is like equal to 1.5. I'm just making that number up. I don't know. Okay. If we add those two things together, we're going to get this value, and we're going to have this be the new position. So what's going to happen is the ball is going to move from here to that new position down there based on this formula. Okay, we want to have a similar formula if the ball, or if we pick up this side of the tablet. Okay, so now it's going to want to sense motion going in this direction. So we're going to need a similar formula that will take the current x value, which as of right now is 0, and add on to it whatever sort of acceleration it senses to get some new number. And so the ball will move from here in this direction to a new x value. That's what we want to have happen. So now let's just say the ball ends up over here now. Okay, so there's our new position. So that's the idea. Notice this works with those two things independently. We're going to tell it to move to an x value, and we're going to tell it to move to a y value. So we're going to need one formula to calculate this new y value, another formula to calculate this new x value, and we're going to want to plug those formulas into these two slots right here. Now the cool thing is, because it's doing both of those in the same procedure, the cool thing is, if I were to pick up the tablet up here in the corner, now it's sensing an acceleration this way and an acceleration this way both. And so that's going to make the ball do this formula, but it's also going to make the ball do that formula, and the result is that the ball ends up moving diagonally. Okay, and so that's kind of cool because it's set up to do both of them together. So that's what we need to do. We need to add to this block a formula for the x and a formula for the y. And we kind of have already said what the formula is going to be. It's going to be the old position plus the acceleration. That's going to be our formula. Okay, so think about how we're going to do this. We need the old position. So we need to get this value. So how did I get that value? Remember, we hover over it, and then we can grab that value. So we're going to need that. We're also going to need the acceleration. So I hover over it. Now I can get the acceleration. And we're going to add those two together. So adding is over here in the math menu. So in the math menu, there's adding. I'm going to pull that in, and we're going to add those two things together. Okay, so what I'd like you to do right now is the same thing for the new y coordinate. We're going to move it to a new y position based on this formula right here. So it's almost the same formula, but we're using y values instead. Okay, so I'm going to pause my recording for a second. You pause the video for just a second. Build out this equation if you would, please. Once you've got that equation built out, then go ahead and turn the video back on, and we'll finish this piece up. Okay, so hopefully you were able to build something like this. If you want to check what you made real quick against mine, I still am getting the variables, and I'm still adding them together. Maybe double check to make sure that you've got an x position with an x acceleration going to the new x value, and you have a y position with the y acceleration going to the new y value. Double check that. Okay, now here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop this video right here, and I want you to test it. And what you're going to see is that it doesn't move the right way. We haven't completely solved the issue of how to make the ball move yet. But this has been a long video already. I want you to test it and see what happens Once you test it, you don't have to call me over anything. Just go ahead and move on to the next video.